How you doing, everybody? Welcome back to Before I Forget. This is my video channel inspired by my Instagram channel, 1985 Road Dog. That Instagram channel features photos from my life and music, both as a fan and as somebody that worked in the business in multiple areas. Once again, if you're new to the channel, I don't do any editing here. I just sit down, hit record, and tell some stories. That's also part of this channel. I'm telling stories and getting them down on video so I don't forget them. But I've got a pretty good memory. So thanks to those that have been following me and have been tuning in and commenting. I really appreciate it. This chapter, we're going to talk about Twisted Sister in the club days. Huge part of my life growing up as a teen, late teens, early 20s. If most people just know Twisted Sister from the Stay Hungry album and We're Not Gonna Take It and I Wanna Rock in 1984, 85, that Twisted Sister. But Twisted Sister has been around as a band, a functioning band, since I think it was 1973. They started out as a glamish Bowie type of Lou Reed, Velvet Underground cover band. And they were a cover band for really 10 years before they made it and got a record deal and got signed. This whole story with Twisted and their rise and 10 years in the bars and slogging it out 3 sets a night for 10 years, that's all in their documentary, We Are Twisted Fucking Sister, directed by Andrew Horn. I'm actually in that documentary. I was interviewed for that. And I'll tell you why later on in this video. But if you've not seen that documentary, it's really good. I mean, Twisted slogged it out, man, doing covers. And slowly over time, they worked in their own original material. And when they got their record deal, you know, their second album on Atlantic Records, Stay Hungry, went multi-platinum. That was a huge hit, big MTV videos. And then it was downhill from there, really. You know, the band fell apart due to other, you know, multiple issues, ego, money, the usual reasons. But anyway, this story is about their club days. So, if you saw my last video, my parents divorced and I moved to Georgia for a few years and saw a lot of my earliest concerts and some of my greatest concerts I saw in Georgia as a kid, 13, 14, 15, 16, like in that area. I moved back to New York in, I think it was May of 78. Immediately became a DJ. But I was in my senior year of high school in New York at Lawrence High School, and which is in Nassau County, Long Island. And a friend I had known from when I was really little in New York, we reconnected at school, and you know, everybody was talking about this band Twisted Sister. And, you know, I had never heard of them, of course. I just, you know, got back to New York. So turns out my dad, who, you know, was in that world of nightclubs and bars and restaurants, he knew the owner of the club Speaks, where they were playing every Thursday. That summer of 1978, spring and summer of 78, they were playing Twisted Sister. Twisted Sister, excuse me, was playing at Speaks, a big nightclub in Long Island, held about 2,000, really packed out, 2,500 people. So Twisted was there every Thursday as like a house band. And I was 17 at the time. I was underage technically because the drinking age at the time was still 18 to drink. And I was 17, but my dad, you know, told me who to ask for at the front door. And I went with my friend from school and we got in to see Twisted Sister. I want to say it was June of 78 was the first time I saw Twisted Sister. I was confused earlier. I thought I had seen them for the first time at a club called Beggar's Opera in Queens. But after researching and going back, it was that June of 78 at Speaks, first time I saw Twisted Sister. Again, that time frame, that period of time, 70s, late 70s, early 80s, you know, the drinking age was 18, and there were a million bars. There were so many bars in that area. You've got, Long Island, you've got New Jersey, you've got the upper counties of Westchester, you've got Connecticut. So many bars and clubs because the drinking age was 18 and there was no photograph on a driver's license. There was no picture. So it was just everybody went out. If you were 16, you had a fake ID, 15 fake ID, you were out in these bars. So these bars were packing them in, thousands of people, some of them. The big ones, Speaks held 2,500. The Fountain Casino in New Jersey held almost 5,000. Hammerheads in West Islip, the second Hammerheads in West Islip held like 3,000, I think. So there were some huge clubs, and Twisted Sister was the king of that club scene. They played 4 or 5 nights a week, 3 sets a night, and they worked their way up over the years. Dee Snider joined the band in 1976, and then that really was their march to the record deal. Dee joined, he started writing all the songs and kind of took over the songwriting. So 76, 77, 78, 79, 80. By the time they hit 1980, they released their Bad Boys single. They self-pressed their own record label, Twisted Sister Records, Bad Boys of Rock and Roll, 45. And they kicked off the new Bad Boys Summer Tour, which was new costumes, new image, a little bit more, you have to remember 1980, New Wave was everything. New Wave was big. Metal was kind of still around. You still had the Scorpions and Judas Priest and but New Wave and that kind of punk imagery had kind of taken over a lot. So Twisted kind of took that. They had leather jackets, motorcycle jackets, and each guy had his own color. Dee was pink, JJ was yellow, Mark Mendoza was blue, etc. So each guy had their color, and they had a leather jacket that kind of matched, and they were a little bit more edgy, not as heavy metal in 1980. But that slowly changed as Dee started writing more songs, and the emergence and the ascension of heavy metal again, the new wave of British heavy metal, Iron Maiden and Saxon and Motorhead, and that scene started erupting out of England. Def Leppard was in that scene, and that influenced Dee and his songwriting and influenced Twisted. So I'm going to see Twisted Sister all the time. I went to see them, I don't know, definitely over 50 times, probably 75 at least. I would go a lot of times by myself. I didn't care. I was a devoted Twisted Sister fan. In the clubs. Now you have to remember, you're in a club with 3,000 people. And Twisted's on stage, and they were loud, really loud, and they did cover songs. So people were there, yes, to socialize and hear music, good music, familiar songs, but Dee wouldn't tolerate that. Dee would single people out in the audience if you were too cool or you were standing there with your arms folded or not clapping or not going nuts. Dee would single you out and just humiliate you and harass you until you left the club. It was like no tourists were allowed at Twisted Sister shows. You had to be into it, or Dee would find you, and everybody would start chanting, go the fuck home. It was really hardcore at Twisted Sister shows by that time. But it would be packed. People online waiting to get in. 3,000 people to see an unsigned band doing covers and some original songs too. Twisted were the kings of that world. It's hard to understand how ferocious they were. The cover songs that they did, to me, were like the beginning of thrash metal. They would do, something from like Johnny Be Good to, Black Sabbath, Neon Nights, to It's Only Rock and Roll by the Stones, but everything was so fast and 1,000 miles an hour and tight. They were the tightest band I've ever heard. 3 sets a night for 10 years. They were tight, man. They were like a steamroller, Twisted Sister. Once they got signed and everything, I felt good, great for them. I was happy for them. Twisted got signed to Atlantic. They were huge, but they lost what they were to me. It became cartoonish. They were always cartoonish, but it really became cartoonish with the videos. But man, Twisted, the Memorial Day weekend, May of 1980, that Memorial Day weekend of 1980, Twisted were unveiling the brand new Bad Boys show and the Bad Boys tour and the new single and all this stuff. So it was a big deal if you were into that. So I went to that show with me and Bruno Ravel. Bruno and I are friends for a long time. But back then we were kids, 17, 18, 19. We were 19. I was 19. Bruno was probably 18, 19. So we went to this club. The club was called Detroit, and it was upstate New York a little bit in the town of Portchester. And Twisted was playing the weekend, and they'd sold it out. Plus, local radio station, I think it was still WBAB or WLIR, one of the two recorded the show and played it live, over the air. So it was a big deal. And the first 200 people online got a T-shirt that said, Twisted Sister premieres the Bad Boys tour at Detroit. I still have that shirt. It's actually a picture of it up on my Instagram. So, they were just ferocious, man. But again, the drinking age was 18. So you were out in bars at 16. So you could go to a bar, or a club rather, that held 2,000 people on a friggin' Tuesday night, and it'd be packed because it was all kids, and I was one of them. You had endless energy as a kid. You stay out all night and go to work the next day. I was working as a DJ at this time at night, and in the daytime, I was working for Important Record Distributors, which was an import record distributor that imported European music or foreign records, Japan, Belgium, Holland, Germany, England, and sold them to stores in America. They were a very big import distributor. From that distributor was launched Relativity Records and Combat Records and Megadeth and all that stuff, Metallica, Exodus, Possessed, all that crazy thrash metal came out of Combat. But it started as this import record distributor. So I was a big Twisted Sister fan, and I got to know their road manager, Joe Gerber, a.k.a. Joe Atlantis. And I introduced myself, and I gave him my card from the record distributor. I said, hey, I work at this record distributor. Get me some of the Twisted Sister singles, because I had 2 singles, I'll Never Grow Up Now and Bad Boys of Rock and Roll. I said, get me some singles, and I'll sell them at the distributor. So he brought me some singles down to the distributor, and we kind of remained tight, and I would fill them in. So I, as a fan of Twisted Sister, started sending their singles to all the British music magazines like Sounds, and, NME. I would send the single and say, hey, you need to review this, and this band is amazing. And back then, Sounds was like the heavy metal, hard rock weekly music paper. This paper came out every week, and it was dedicated to music, mostly hard rock. So I started sending the singles to people that had playlists. They had all these playlists. Each writer had his own playlist. So I started sending these to the writers, and they started, one day I just see one of the writers puts Twisted Sister, I'll Never Grow Up Now on their chart. And then it started appearing on other charts. And then it started appearing on import charts for England. In England, they had a chart for foreign records they imported, which was one of them was Twisted Sister. So we started selling these records to distributing them overseas. We started shipping them over to Europe and England. They didn't sell that well in America because nobody really cared, because it wasn't the hip thing at the time. It's 1980, 81 in there. New wave is big, huge. And metal is starting to come up. But Twisted didn't really, in America, no one cared. So the singles didn't do well in America, but we started shipping them in quantity over to England, 50, 100 at a time. So I brought, one time Twisted was playing at Hammerheads, and it was packed. And Joe Gerber, their road manager, told me, hey, come down early and bring all these magazines you're telling me about. and we'll show the guys. So I went down there with Bruno, and I know Steve West was with me, and he got us in, and he got us a cool table, like right toward the front, because on the sides of, you had a big room where people stood to see the band, and on the side you had like an elevated area with tables and stuff. So he got us a table up there, which I'd never sat at. We were always in the front pumping our fist at the band. And then this is before the club opened. And then he brought JJ out, and I started showing JJ all these magazines, Sounds, and all the charts. Twisted Sister's in these charts in a foreign UK newspaper. They never even been there. Nobody's even seen them play. So that was kind of the start of Twisted getting their deal with Secret Records, which was a small independent UK label, and them going to England, because you have to watch the documentary to understand how many missed opportunities and how many disappointments they had up until this point. They had all these supposed record deals a million times over the years. None of them ever panned out. So after 10 years, they were like, this is never going to work. But they kept trying. They got this independent deal with Secret Records in England, went to England. Lemmy took them under his wing, and the rest is history. So that was my involvement with Twisted as a fan, and I, had a small part in helping them get noticed in England. But watch the documentary. It's a great documentary, whether you like Twisted Sister or not. It's a real, human interest story to me. But, yeah, man, I've seen a lot of shows. I've seen the Rolling Stones probably, 80, 90 times. I've seen a million bands. I've been on tour with bands. I've seen so many shows working at Limelight over the years. For 6, 7 years, I saw so many bands at Limelight. Twisted Sister, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, right in there, man. Untouchable. No one could touch them. Anybody that opened for Twisted regretted it. And anybody that Twisted opened for regretted it. It was like they were vicious, Twisted Sister. Some of the greatest rock and roll I've ever seen in my life. Watch that documentary. So that's my Twisted Sister story. It's something that I'm very passionate about. Watch the documentary. You'll see my comments in there. And, discover Twisted Sister Club Daze. Badass, man. Thank you very much for following and watching. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.